Shadow in the precinct, a werewolf among us. The 17th precinct had never been a peaceful place. It was a district where crime thrived with terrifying regularity, and the cops had long grown accustomed to brutality and deception. But that night, a special tension hung in the air. Detective Mark Calder stared at the fresh photographs of mutilated bodies scattered across the alley near an abandoned warehouse. Deep, ragged wounds, the unmistakable marks of massive claws, and a complete absence of blood. The killer seemed to drain their victims dry, down to the last drop. "Are you sure this isn't the work of some psycho?" Lieutenant Brooks asked hoarsely, peering into the file. "Or some damn cult?" "I don't know," Calder answered, taking a slow drag from his cigarette. "But one thing's clear, this bastard isn't human." The precinct was quiet, too quiet. A few officers were filling out reports, some were sipping coffee, others were yawning at their monitors. But everyone could feel it, a strange, oppressive pressure. And then it began. A wild, unnatural roar shattered the silence, shaking the very walls of the station. In an instant, chaos erupted in the lobby. Glass exploded, a heavy thud against metal, and then a blood-curdling scream. Calder lunged for his weapon, but deep down, something told him that tonight, they were facing something beyond comprehension. "Everyone to your stations," Brooks barked, drawing his pistol. Officers scrambled for the armory, while others took cover behind desks, weapons trained toward the source of the noise. The lobby was a wreck, glass doors shattered. Bloodied Officer Cordner lay motionless on the floor, his wide eyes frozen in silent horror. "Did anyone see what it was?" Calder clenched his jaw, gripping his shotgun. "No," Officer Reyes rasped, loading his rifle. "But it's fast, unbelievably fast." Brooks activated the emergency lockdown. Now no one could enter or leave until they figured out what they were dealing with. "All right, listen up." The lieutenant's voice was firm, though even he was tense. "We've got a killer inside the building. Maybe a maniac, maybe... hell, who knows? We move in pairs and sweep the area. If you see something strange, don't try to be a hero. Shoot to kill." The officers began their sweep. The hallways were eerily silent, broken only by the muffled sounds of footsteps and the clicks of safeties being released. Calder moved with a young officer, Hanks, who was pale as a ghost. "You think it's human?" Hanks whispered. "If it is, it's one hell of a psychopath," Calder muttered darkly. Suddenly a garbled voice crackled through the radio, thick with terror. It's not human. It's..." Then a sickening crunch and a dull thud. Silence. Calder and Hanks exchanged a glance. "That was Murphy. He was patrolling the basement," Hanks whispered. "Then we know where we're going," Calder said, reloading his shotgun. They descended the staircase, and with every step closer to the basement, an unnatural sense of dread thickened the air. It smelled of dampness and something metallic. The corridor was dimly lit. The flickering lights cast jagged shadows along the walls. Calder froze. Lying in the middle of the hallway was what remained of Murphy. His body was mangled beyond recognition, and the walls were painted in blood. "Oh God," Hanks choked out, stumbling backward. And then, the darkness at the end of the corridor moved. Something was there, shifting, prowling. A moment later, Calder saw them, two glowing eyes reflecting the dim light like those of a beast. Calder didn't wait. "Fire!" he roared, pulling the trigger. The shotgun thundered, the blast shattering the oppressive silence. The explosive rounds tore through the shadowed figure, but no scream, no spray of blood, just a dull impact and a sound like a growl. "Shit!" Calder quickly reloaded. The creature lunged forward. It moved too fast, unnaturally fast, like a blurred shadow. Hank staggered back, panicked, firing blindly, but the beast was already upon them. A massive clawed hand struck his chest, sending him crashing against the wall like a rag doll. The sickening crunch of ribs breaking filled the air, and the young officer crumpled lifelessly to the floor. Calder dove to the side, firing again, this time aiming true. The creature recoiled. Silver buckshot had done its job. It howled, retreating into the darkness. "Silver," Calder whispered, panting heavily. He rushed to Hank's, but the officer was already dead, his chest torn open, his face frozen in a mask of terror. The radio crackled to life with Brooks's voice. "Calder, what the hell is going on?" "It's not human." Calder exhaled shakily. "We need backup, and silver bullets, if we have any." Static buzzed over the radio. "Say again, you..." The signal abruptly cut out. Suddenly, the station went dark. Calder froze as a chill ran down his spine. Something was breathing in the darkness. The basement was swallowed by shadows, turning it into a death trap. Calder stood still, straining to listen. The heavy guttural breathing came from the far end of the hallway, where he had last seen the creature. Slowly, Calder stepped back, keeping his finger on the trigger. He knew that reloading now would be a death sentence. A low scraping sound echoed, the scrape of claws against concrete. The creature was moving, hunting him. A step, another step. Calder's mind raced. Running blindly in the dark was suicide. Staying put, just as bad. He needed to do something. He lunged sideways, hands searching the wall until they found cold metal, an old utility closet. Yanking the handle, he slipped inside, pressing his back against the wall. Outside, the footsteps stopped. The beast was right there. Calder could hear it breathing just beyond the thin door. Then, slowly, something sharp began to scrape against the metal. The creature wasn't in a hurry. It knew he was inside. And then, the door began to open slowly. Calder knew he had only a few seconds before the door fully opened. Trying not to make a sound, he fumbled for his radio on his belt and pressed the call button. "Brooks. Damn it, someone. I'm in the basement storage room. It's here. It's..." The door jerked. The beast was slowly pressing against it, forcing its way in. Calder clenched his teeth, hoping someone could hear him. A raspy voice crackled through the radio. "Calder, hold on. We're coming." But he was almost out of time. The werewolf yanked the door open, and for the first time, the detective saw it up close. A massive shadow, glowing yellow eyes, a distorted, beastly snout lined with fangs, saliva dripping from its jaws. Its body was covered in thick, dark fur, and the claws on its massive hands gleamed under the dim emergency light like blades. Calder didn't hesitate. He fired. The shotgun blast roared through the storage room, the buckshot slamming into the creature's shoulder, making it stagger back with a furious roar. But it didn't stop the monster. The werewolf lunged forward, and then another gunshot rang out. Not from Calder's shotgun. The beast howled and dropped to its knees. In the doorway stood Lieutenant Brooks, revolver in hand. "Get up, Calder," he shouted. "We need to get out before it gets back up." But Calder didn't move. He had just noticed something that made his blood run cold. A metallic badge gleamed on the werewolf's neck. Ignoring Brooks's command, Calder stepped forward, his gaze locked on the blood-streaked badge dangling from the beast's thick fur. "Damn it, Calder! What the hell are you doing?" Brooks glanced around anxiously. "We need to go." But the detective wasn't listening. Slowly, he reached out and yanked the badge off the creature's fur. The badge was smeared with blood, but the numbers on it were still visible. Number 847. Calder froze. That number, he knew it. Slowly, he lifted his gaze to the werewolf lying on the floor, its breathing ragged, but its yellow eyes. Its eyes were now looking at him with awareness. "Shit," Calder whispered as the pieces in his mind finally clicked together. He knew who this badge belonged to. It was one of them, one of the police officers. Who is it?" Brooks's voice trembled when he saw Calder's expression. But before the detective could answer, the beast suddenly twitched, its muscles tensing. It lunged. Calder didn't think. He raised his shotgun, aimed straight at the creature's head, and pulled the trigger. The deafening blast shook the room. The werewolf convulsed, the back wall of the storage room splattered with blood, and the beast collapsed heavily onto the floor. Silence. Calder cautiously stepped forward, his shotgun still raised. The body twitched in its final spasms, and then it began to change. The thick, dark fur receded, the claws retracted, the fangs shrank. A few seconds later, the monster was gone, and in its place lay a man, naked, bloodied, with a gaping hole in his skull. Calder gritted his teeth as he stared at the face, and felt his heart clench. He knew him. It was Officer Reed, one of the precinct's veterans. An experienced cop, a good man, respected by everyone. Brooks stood beside him, his eyes wide with horror. This can't be." Calder exhaled heavily. But then, a strange sensation pierced the back of his skull. They had killed one werewolf. But was he the only one? Calder clenched the blood-stained badge in his fist and turned his gaze to Brooks. "We can't just leave this alone. If Reed was a werewolf, who else?" Brooks swallowed hard, staring at the lifeless body of his fellow officer. "You realize if this gets out, there'll be panic." His voice was tense. "Yes, but if we don't figure out who else is infected, we're as good as dead." Calder reloaded his shotgun. "We need to check everyone." Brooks nodded, but his hands were shaking. Calder took a deep breath. Now he knew what to look for. Werewolves couldn't completely hide their nature. There were always small details. Slightly elongated fangs, movements that were just a little too sharp, a pallor that didn't seem natural. "We need to question everyone," he said. "Watch how they react. Any strange behavior, anything, is a reason for suspicion." Brooks looked at him uncertainly. "You're suggesting we start a witch hunt inside the precinct?" "No." Calder shook his head. "I'm suggesting we find out who's hiding among us before they strike first." They started up the stairs, but suddenly the corridor lights flickered back on. "The power!" Brooks froze. Calder lifted his head. The station was too quiet. Then, from the radio on the wall, a voice crackled through the static. "All units, emergency, West Wing, blood everywhere. One of our own has gone crazy." Calder and Brooks exchanged glances. "They've already started," the detective breathed. Calder rushed to the nearest control panel. "We can't let them escape," he snapped at Brooks, his fingers flying over the keys. "Jesus, you're locking us in here with those things." Brooks looked horrified. "We have no choice. If they get out, the whole city is in danger." A loud metallic clang echoed through the station. The main gates slammed shut, sealing the exits. Emergency lockdown mode engaged. Calder grabbed his radio. "All officers, this is Detective Calder. The station is on lockdown. I repeat, no one leaves until we figure out what's happening. Everyone stay in your positions and..." A low, guttural growl came through the speaker. Then a scream. Someone's dying scream. "The West Wing," Brooks whispered, gripping his revolver. Calder clenched his jaw. They had locked the doors. But were the monsters inside with them? Or were the monsters among them? Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Someone was coming. Calder grabbed Brooks by the shoulder and yanked him into a side hallway. "Don't move. Don't make a sound," he whispered, pressing himself against the wall. Brooks nodded, his grip tightening on his revolver. His breathing was heavy. The footsteps grew closer. A tall figure stepped into the corridor. Calder held his breath. It was Captain Henry McCown, their commanding officer. He walked slowly, his hand resting on his holster. His face was calm, but his eyes... Calder didn't like the look in them. Deep, empty, almost inhuman. The captain stopped a few meters away. "Calder." His voice was unnervingly even. "Brooks, I know you're here. Come out." Brooks made a move, but Calder tightened his grip on his arm, preventing him from stepping out. The captain turned his head. "I know you locked the compartment. Good idea," he smirked. "But it won't help you." Calder felt a tightening in his chest. McCown knew something. Calder could barely breathe, his fingers gripping the shotgun so tightly his knuckles turned white. Captain McCown stood in the center of the hallway, listening. "You do realize this is pointless, don't you?" His voice was calm, almost lazy. "You'll have to come out eventually." Brooks barely nodded, his palms trembling. The captain took another step forward, and then stopped. Calder noticed his fingers twitch. A spasm ran down his neck. McCown sighed heavily, tilting his head. And in the next instant, his spine cracked. Brooks almost screamed, but Calder clamped his hand over his mouth. The captain's head jerked unnaturally to the side. Spasms pulsed through his skin. The skin was moving. Calder saw something tearing its way out from beneath it. This wasn't a man. Suddenly, McCown straightened sharply. His eyes flashed bright yellow. "Oh, you're still here, huh?" His voice dropped, becoming raspier, inhuman. He turned directly toward their hiding spot. Calder realized they had been noticed. He took a deep breath, and before Brooks could stop him, he stepped out of cover, shotgun ready. "Captain," his voice was firm, but his insides were tightening with tension. "What's happening to you?" McCown tilted his head, his yellow eyes flashing. "You're brave, Calder," his lips stretched into a grin. "Or foolish." Brooks froze in the shadows, his fingers gripping the revolver. Calder took another step forward. "I saw what happened to Reed. He was one of you, but not the only one, right?" The captain smirked. "Finally, you're starting to understand." Calder gritted his teeth. "How many of you are there?" McCown slowly moved forward, his shadow spreading ominously across the wall. "Enough to make sure this area no longer belongs to humans." Brooks sucked in a sharp breath. You mean... Oh, Brooks, did you really think it was that simple?" The captain grinned, his elongated fangs gleaming. "We've been here a long time, much longer than you can imagine." Calder felt the chill creeping inside him. McCown continued, "You have a choice, detective. You can join us, or end up like Reed." He took a step closer. "Join us, Calder. In this world, only the strong survive." Brooks cursed quietly through clenched teeth. Calder could feel his heart pounding wildly. Calder wasn't going to play their game. He raised the shotgun sharply and fired. The explosion of sound filled the corridor. The silver shot hit Captain McCown square in the chest. McCown was thrown back. He crashed to the floor, gasping for breath, his body jerking in spasms. "Damn," Brooks muttered, stepping out from cover with his revolver in hand. Calder took a step closer. The captain was still alive. He propped himself up on his elbows, looking at Calder with a predatory grin. "Ha! You really think this will stop me?" His chest began to move again. The wound was healing before their eyes. "No way," Brooks whispered. McCown lunged forward. Calder barely managed to dodge as claws grazed his face by mere millimeters. "Run!" Brooks shouted, grabbing Colder by the sleeve. They bolted down the hall, hearing the low, inhuman growl behind them. McCown was getting back to his feet. "You won't escape." The police station was turning into a trap. Colder and Brooks didn't hesitate. Running to the roof was their only option. They raced down the hallway, hearing heavy footsteps and bestial growls echoing behind them. "Faster!" Brooks shouted, flinging open the door to the staircase. Colder glanced back for a split second. McCown was already right behind them. His body had fully transformed, clawed paws, elongated snout, hungry eyes burning with thirst. The werewolf lunged forward. Colder barely managed to slam the door shut behind him. "Go!" he barked at Brooks, charging up the stairs. A loud bang, the door shook. A second, the hinges began to bend. "He's going to break it down!" Brooks screamed. They reached the roof exit. Colder rammed into the door with his shoulder. It gave way. The fresh air hit their faces. The roof. But there was no escape. The city stretched out below, hundreds of feet down. No fire escapes, no way down. "We're trapped," Brooks groaned. A crash sounded behind them. The werewolf had busted through the door. McCown stepped onto the roof. "It's over for you," he hissed, licking his bloodied teeth. Colder tightened his grip on the shotgun. He slowly raised his hands, signaling that he wasn't going to shoot. "Wait, McCown, you don't just want to kill us, do you?" The werewolf narrowed his eyes dangerously, but didn't attack. "Oh, Colder." His voice was low, breaking into a growl. "Stalling. You think someone's coming to save you?" Colder didn't flinch. "You could have killed us downstairs, but you didn't. It means you want something else." McCown tilted his head, his eyes flickering with interest. "Clever." Brooks shifted his gaze from Colder to the werewolf, tightening his grip on his revolver. "What the hell are you talking about?" he hissed. Colder didn't take his eyes off McCown. "You said we could become part of this. What does that mean?" The werewolf grinned maliciously. "You really want to know? Are you ready to tell me?" McCown smirked. "Maybe." Colder sensed a chance. He had just bought himself a little time. He took a cautious step forward, keeping his hands visible. "I'm listening. What do you want, McCown?" The werewolf didn't move, but his yellow eyes glinted. "We're not here by accident, Colder. You humans think you control this city. The law, the order. Ha!" He slowly started moving around them, circling them. "What if I told you that the werewolves have been running this place for a long time?" Brooks hissed softly. "Bullshit." But Colder didn't blink. "Prove it." McCown grinned. "You've heard the stories, haven't you? Missing people, unsolved murders. Everyone thought it was gangs, maniacs, but it was us." Brooks gripped the revolver tightly. "You're saying there are more werewolves in the precinct?" McCown stopped. "Not just in the precinct, in the whole system." Colder felt a chill crawl down his spine. "Politicians, businessmen, even cops, all those who are stronger, smarter. We live among you, we control you, and you don't even know it." He tilted his head. "But you're not like the rest." Colder clenched his fists. "What do you mean?" McCown smirked. "Guess." Colder tensed, his fingers twitching on the shotgun's trigger. "Speak, McCown. What do you mean?" The werewolf narrowed his eyes, a predator's gleam in them. "You feel it, don't you?" Colder gritted his teeth. "Feel what?" "Oh, don't pretend, detective. You've always known you're not like the rest." Colder's heart skipped a beat. Brooks shot him a quick glance. What's he talking about? But Colder couldn't tear his gaze from McCown. The werewolf slowly took a step forward, his claws scraping against the rooftop's concrete. "You've noticed that your wounds heal faster than others, that in fights you feel the movement before the strike, that sometimes..." Voices echo in your head. Colder clenched his fists, pushing away the uncomfortable sensation in his chest. You're lying. McCown smirked. Am I? He leaned in closer. You're one of us, Colder. You don't need to run or fight. Just accept it. Colder swallowed hard. It was madness. But deep down, he knew McCown was speaking the truth. Brooks tightened his grip on the revolver. Colder, don't listen to him. Colder didn't lower his shotgun, but he didn't pull the trigger either. If I'm one of you, then why didn't I know about it? McCown grinned. Because you haven't awakened yet. Colder gritted his teeth. What does that mean? The werewolf tilted his head. Don't you remember anything strange from your childhood? Dreams, flares of rage, maybe moments when you felt something inside you wanting to break free. Colder froze. Memories. Screams in the dark, the smell of blood. A coldness that was followed by uncontrollable, fiery rage. He had always thought they were just nightmares. But what if... Bullshit, he muttered, but his voice betrayed him, cracking slightly. McCown laughed. It's too late for you to run from yourself, Colder. You've already started changing, or you wouldn't be feeling this. Brooks stepped closer, his revolver twitching in his hand. He's lying, Colder. He's just messing with you. McCown tilted his head, never taking his eyes off Colder. And what do you think then? Colder gritted his teeth. Number, it's a lie. McCown squinted. Really? You're just playing me, trying to confuse me. I'm human, and you're a monster. That's the only difference. His voice was firm, but doubt churned inside him. McCown tilted his head again. If you're so sure, Colder, then why are your hands shaking? Colder snapped his gaze downward. Damn. His fingers were subtly trembling on the shotgun's trigger. You... He tried to say something, but suddenly felt a sharp thrust in his chest. Brooks shoved him aside and fired, the deafening explosion of the shot. The bullet hit McCown in the shoulder but didn't stop him. The werewolf snarled and lunged forward. Colder didn't hesitate. Crash! The shotgun let out a powerful blast, ripping through the air. McCown jerked back, but didn't fall. Damn. Colder exhaled and pulled the trigger again. Boom! The second bullet struck the werewolf directly in the chest, tearing through skin and bone. But McCown didn't scream. He grinned through the blood, and his eyes flashed yellow. That's not enough, Colder. Brooks was already reloading his revolver, but the werewolf suddenly lunged, knocking him to the ground. Colder raised his shotgun again, but McCown was too fast. Claws sliced through the air. Shot. Silence. Colder stopped breathing. McCown froze, his body slowly swaying. Brooks's silver bullet was lodged straight in the heart. See? Clever! The werewolf rasped, looking at Colder. His lips twisted into a smile even as he dropped to his knees. We are not the last. McCown's voice faded, and he collapsed to the ground, motionless. Colder froze, feeling the chill creep under his skin. This... Brooks got up, breathing heavily. This was too easy. Colder gripped the shotgun tighter. Yes, too easy. Colder took a step forward, cautiously approaching McCown's fallen body. Every step echoed in the empty room, and his hands stayed on the shotgun, ready for anything. He leaned down, watching as blood continued to seep from the wound, leaving a gruesome trail behind. He ran a finger along the werewolf's skin, carefully pulling it aside, expecting to see some strange, deformed body. But there was nothing like that. McCown looked like an ordinary human, except for his eyes, which were filled with that strange light, and the blood dripping onto the floor, thicker than a normal person's. Colder carefully pushed his body away, not wanting to touch it more than necessary. He didn't know what exactly he was looking for, but this wasn't just a regular murder. It was something else. Click. The sound he heard was like the snap of a blade as McCown exhaled. Calder quickly pulled back. He watched as the blood from the werewolf's wound began to move, as if something inside his body was living its own life. He grabbed the shotgun and stood ready. McCown wasn't dead. Calder felt the cold wrap around his body. His instincts screamed at him, "Run!" Fast and without looking back, he darted for the door. The sound of footsteps behind him forced him to pick up speed. Suddenly, the door slammed open and Brooks appeared in front of him. "Let's go, Calder," he yelled, barely dodging McCown's attack. Calder grabbed his arm and pulled him along. They dashed out the side door, where 2 patrol cars were already parked. "What's wrong with him?" one of the officers asked, watching McCown's strange behavior as he knelt, motionless. "Not now," Calder replied, ignoring the question. "It's better if he's not here." But as they moved down the street, they both felt something intangible hanging in the air. Calder looked around, realizing they weren't alone. Calder and Brooks quickly got into the car, not looking back. Calder gave the order to drive, his heart beating faster than usual. He understood that the situation was slipping out of control. Something was wrong somewhere, and they had only just begun to grasp what they were about to face. "We need to find a place where they can't find us," Brooks said, glancing at the rearview mirrors. Calder nodded. He knew they needed shelter, but where? The road was empty. No signs of pursuit, no sounds, just the silence that pressed against their minds. A few minutes later, they found themselves at an abandoned station, far from the city. In the distance, only the dark silhouettes of trees loomed, seeming hostile and threatening. "Do you think we're safe?" Brooks asked, nervously scanning their surroundings. "For now," Calder replied. "But we need time to figure out what happened." At that moment, a chilling howl pierced the distance. The same sound Calder had once heard in his nightmares. Calder looked silently at Brooks, and Brooks understood that they needed to lock themselves in. They began barricading all doors and windows, using whatever they could find, old wooden planks and metal structures. Calder could feel the tension in the air, building with each passing second. As they worked, the howling grew louder, now seemingly coming from different corners of the station. Calder couldn't tell where exactly. It was a sound filled with terror. When they finished securing the doors, Calder glanced at his partner. Brooks no longer looked as confident as before. His face was pale, and he held his gun, ready for action. "Did you hear that?" he asked, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Yeah," Calder clenched his fists. It's not human. This can't be anything normal." Suddenly, a massive thud struck the door, shaking the station. The loud crash was so intense that Calder and Brooks slipped on the floor, losing their balance. The sound kept growing. It tore through the silence, as if something massive and unimaginable was trying to break through the barricades. Calder silently raised his shotgun and moved into a corner, trying to blend into the shadows. He knew that if anything moved, it would move quickly and leave no time to react. Brooks stood beside him, holding his gun, ready to fire. Silence. Another blow to the door, this time harder than before. The wooden planks creaked, and Calder could feel something heavy pushing through the entrance. A shadow in the hallway. Then, from the darkness, a figure appeared. Its eyes, yellow like an animal's, its claws gleaming with saliva, sparkled under the dim light. It wasn't McCown, it was someone else. The figure lunged from the darkness with such speed that Calder barely had time to pull the trigger. The bullet missed, and the creature sharply veered to the side as if it had predicted his move. Silence. Calder tried to reload the shotgun, but his hands were trembling with tension. Brooks fired first, but the bullet merely grazed the creature's skin, leaving a mark. The creature turned and snarled. "Not bad." Its voice was deep, almost animalistic. "You can't defeat me, Calder." Calder nodded silently to Brooks, and they both froze, not moving. They hid in the shadows, holding their breath, hoping the creature wouldn't notice them in that moment of silence. The creature paused, sniffing the air as if searching for their scent. Its yellow eyes darted around the room, but it didn't move, as though something had stopped it. Calder felt his pulse quicken, and it seemed like the air around them was getting thicker, every sound they could make feeling like a loud bang. The creature circled around, and with every step, it came closer. Calder squeezed his eyes shut, his body tensed to the limit, and his heart beat so hard that it felt like it might explode from his chest. But just as the creature took another step toward them, it stopped, as if it sensed something. Silence. At that moment, they heard heavy footsteps from another part of the building. The creature abruptly turned, and without saying a word, dashed into the dark corridor, leaving them alone in the complete darkness. Calder didn't hesitate. He took a step toward the exit, immediately grabbing Brooks by the arm. "Quick, Brooks!" His voice was filled with tension. "We need to go." They rushed out through the emergency exit, squeezing into the dark corridor, where there was no sound. Calder felt adrenaline pulsing through his veins, and with every step, the thought echoed that they needed to get out of this nightmare as quickly as possible. When they reached the nearest street, Calder glanced back. Silence. They were on the edge, and Calder knew time was against them. Still, they couldn't just leave everything to chance. "What now?" Brooks asked, breathing heavily, losing strength. Without stopping, Calder looked ahead. One thing was clear: their lives depended on where they went next. Calder resolutely headed toward the old cemetery. He knew it wasn't the safest place, but he also knew that if they were to uncover the mystery of what was happening in this town, they had to go through it. Brooks walked beside him, his face tense like never before. He clearly didn't want to be there, but he couldn't let Calder go alone. As they approached the cemetery, the ground beneath their feet suddenly became soft. The fog thickened around them, absorbing each step, and even the smallest sound seemed deafening. The air was heavy and saturated with an eerie stench. "Are you sure we should go in?" Brooks whispered, glancing around. "Something's wrong here." Calder nodded. He didn't know exactly what they were about to find, but he was certain the answer lay somewhere here. Their gazes fell on the old mausoleum, which appeared to have stood there for centuries. The doors were locked, but through one of the windows, a faint light flickered. Calder approached the door, feeling around it. When he pressed on the door, it creaked and slowly opened. Inside, it was dark, but a dim light seeped through the cracks, creating a gloom that seemed to grow denser with every passing second. Calder and Brooks stepped into the mausoleum. A deathly silence filled the space, and everything was shrouded in an unnatural glow, as if the light within emanated from the essence of the liquid itself. Calder scanned the room, his gaze drifting over the stone walls, weathered by time. Deep cracks and bloodstains on the floor hinted at something far more sinister happening here than just a burial ground. This place reeked of ancient dark magic. In the center of the room stood a huge bowl filled with some dark liquid. It emitted a faint light, one that didn't seem to come from candles or fire, but from within itself, as though the very essence of the liquid radiated its own glow. "What is this?" Brooks whispered, his eyes wide with terror. Calder stepped closer, examining the bowl. He could feel something strange beginning to pull him deeper, as if a dark force was trying to consume him. The foul odor hung in the air, and it was clear that mysterious rituals had been performed here. Suddenly he heard footsteps. They weren't human. He froze, pressing himself against the wall, watching as a figure, hidden in the shadows, slowly approached them. The shadow became more distinct, and in it he could make out shoulders, eyes, and teeth gleaming in the dim light. Calder's heart leapt into his throat. He knew this creature was no human. In an instant, Calder realized that their chances of survival lay not in fighting, but in hiding. He quietly grabbed Brooks by the shoulder and pulled him deeper into the mausoleum, seeking cover behind the stone walls. The creature's footsteps grew louder, but Calder focused on breathing silently, not making a sound. The shadows around them moved as if something supernatural was watching their every move. Calder felt his mind clouding as all his instincts screamed to survive. The creature seemed familiar with this place. It clearly sensed their presence but didn't get too close. They found themselves in a deeper corridor within the mausoleum. The walls were covered in ancient symbols, but they were so worn that they were barely visible. Calder noticed the light growing weaker, and the space seemed to stretch endlessly. Suddenly, Brooks stopped short. His gaze was fixed on one of the dug-up tombs standing in the corner. Something was moving inside, amidst the dirt and stones. Calder felt his stomach tighten in fear. Calder stepped forward, still gripping his weapon, and Brooks followed him, holding his breath. The tomb was heavy, covered in dirt and dust, but weak sounds came from its cracks, as if something was moving inside. Calder grabbed a chunk of stone and strained to open the lid. Inside was dark, but something misty slid along the sides of the tomb, making strange noises, as if an invisible hand was reaching out to them from within. To their horror, they saw that there was no body in the tomb, only twisted symbols drawn on the ancient skin covering the bottom. And among these symbols lay a golden amulet, covered in a dark patina. Calder reached out and took the amulet. He immediately felt a pulsating energy emanating from the object. It was like an electric charge running through his body. But the moment his fingers touched the amulet, a loud grinding noise came from the dark corners of the mausoleum, and a shimmering light appeared in the air. Calder felt something dark and ancient consuming his consciousness, something linked to the amulet in his hand. Brooks grabbed him by the arm, but Calder couldn't tear his eyes away from the strange object. He slowly studied the amulet, his fingers tracing its smooth surface. Despite its small size, the amulet felt incredibly heavy. The symbols engraved on it seemed to pulse, radiating a strange aura. With each passing moment, he felt his mind beginning to change, his thoughts clouding, and the sense of reality growing increasingly fluid and unclear. Brooks noticed this and immediately grabbed Calder by the shoulder. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, concern thick in his voice. Calder didn't respond right away. He stared intently at the amulet, feeling his soul beginning to merge with the dark energy emanating from it. For a brief moment, he felt a sense of power, almost irresistibly alluring. But no matter how strongly the amulet called to him, deep down, Calder knew these forces came with a price. If he didn't stop, he might fall completely under the control of this ancient artifact. Suddenly, he felt something sinister stir behind him. It was something far darker and more dangerous than the amulet, and it was drawing closer. Calder jerked his gaze upward, his heart racing with terror. In the depths of the mausoleum, a dark figure appeared. The creature was unimaginably large, its eyes glowing a bright red, and it moved with astounding speed. Calder tensed, gripping the amulet tightly in his hand, and focused on activating its power. It felt as though the amulet had come alive, its energy pulsing through his palm. At the moment he mentally summoned this dark force, the amulet shot a stream of black light into the air, and the space around them seemed to distort. A deep hum filled the air as the amulet shook the very atmosphere with its might. Calder felt his body grow heavy, his mind being pulled into the depths of space, towards something unreachable and malevolent. The figure before him froze, its eyes igniting with a bright red light, and shadows began to carve their way out of the dark corners of the mausoleum, as if they had become part of the very fabric of reality. In that moment, Calder unleashed his fury, using the amulet to create a barrier that surrounded both him and Brooks. The shadows, attempting to strike, collided with an invisible force, and their power was suppressed for a few moments. However, the entity didn't stop. It dropped to the ground and began moving toward Calder with terrifying speed. At that moment, the dark energy of the amulet began to concentrate, forming a dark portal right before them. Calder and Brooks stood on the precipice, as if teetering between worlds. Calder felt the dark energy of the amulet pierce his body, giving him unimaginable strength. Every muscle tightened, and his thoughts became clearer than ever before. He knew that now he could not only defend himself, but also defeat the evil before him. The creature drew closer, its body covered in grimy dark feathers, and its eyes glowed with an ominous fire. It wasn't just aiming to kill them, it sought complete tyranny to seize the world. Calder felt this energy fill his soul. He turned to Brooks and gave him a brief glance, a silent signal. They had to act together. "Ready?" Calder asked, his voice like thunder in the silence. "Ready," Brooks replied, a determined fire gleaming in his eyes. He drew his gun but knew that against this creature, weapons would be useless. The creature leapt toward them, and time seemed to slow. Calder felt the dark energy of the amulet starting to influence his mind, filling him with resolve. He aimed the amulet directly at the center of the figure, and at the moment its beam collided with the horror, the world around them exploded in a wave of light. The amulet emitted a powerful burst of dark light that pierced the creature through, causing it to vanish into the air like smoke. The dark silhouettes surrounding it began to dissolve into nothingness, and all the power the creature had amassed over thousands of years disappeared. However, as the creature vanished, the amulet began to pulse with unimaginable power, as if the very darkness were trying to break free. Calder realized that this wasn't just the destruction of one entity. The amulet was the key, and now it was unlocking gates that could destroy everything tied to the darkness in their city. The creature was gone, but the amulet had activated its full power, the power that crashed down on all the werewolves hidden throughout the city. Calder and Brooks watched as the shadows concealing their fellow werewolves vanished. The amulet wasn't just destroying, it was sealing them, severing their ties to existence. The werewolves who had once hidden among humans were now gone forever. The terrible force that had held the city in its grip had been shattered. Calder and Brooks stood amidst the ruins of what had just been dark and deadly, now just an empty space. Calder felt his body gradually recovering, and the amulet no longer radiated its lethal power. It lay in his hand, lifeless, like a mere ornament, forgotten in the corner of history. Calder and Brooks slowly made their way to the mausoleum's exit, their footsteps echoing in the silence that now reigned in this once grim place. The dark creature was gone, and with it, the threat hanging over the city. The amulet in Calder's hand now appeared as nothing more than an ancient piece of metal, giving off no sign of power. Calder felt a sense of relief. In their eyes, there was no longer any trace of fear, only the certainty that they had won. Around them, there were no more werewolves. The city had been cleansed, and now they could return to their normal lives. The darkness had retreated, and the light at the end of the tunnel had finally been reached. "You know, I thought we'd never make it out of here alive," Brooks said, surveying the wrecked mausoleum. He was exhausted, but his eyes burned with resolve. "But we did." Calder remained silent, staring at the amulet in his hand. All this time, he had felt the weight of the amulet pressing against his mind, but now that the threat had been eliminated, he could only accept that he had won. "Yeah, we did," he said, offering a faint smile. "But I can't forget that we had to destroy all of them." Brooks paused, then shook his head. "Sometimes, in order to save the world, you have to make a brutal choice." They emerged into the open air, where the sky was clear once more, and the air felt fresh. The bright world awaited them. The city was safe, and now, thanks to their struggle, it could begin to recover. Calder knew his life would change. He was no longer the person who had entered this place searching for truth. His journey had come to an end, but now he was ready for a new beginning. Brooks looked at Calder one last time and said, "It's time to go home." Calder and Brooks returned to the city, and its dark streets no longer seemed so grim. They no longer searched for threats, nor did they feel that heavy, menacing presence that had haunted them for weeks. The city was alive and safe again, and with that knowledge, they could take a step into the future. The next morning, Calder returned to his duties at the police station. The dark clouds that had once hung over him were gone from his eyes. He was ready to be just a man again, a cop protecting others. The amulet sat in a drawer on his desk, now merely a memory of the past. Brooks, as promised, returned to his everyday life, falling in love with the idea of starting a new chapter. He gave up dangerous adventures to build a future where there was no room for shadows. Occasionally, they both remembered that night, but quickly pushed it to the back of their minds. The world was safe now, and they no longer needed to fight what couldn't be seen by the eye. Time passed, and life went on. Calder believed they had made the right choice. He was no longer the man who stood on the edge, ready to leap into darkness. He was the one who had chosen the light, and that was a victory that didn't need further proof.